Hi everyone and welcome to this week's video. Last time we took you around the Melrose Gibson Park Caravan and Motorhome Club site, and we also had a look down the high street in the town. In this video we're still in Melrose and wanted to show you more of this lovely town. We really enjoyed our stay at Melrose. It has so much to offer and loads to see and explore. We did cycle the 3 miles out of town down the River Tweed to visit Abbotsford, the extraordinary home of the 19th century novelist Sir Walter Scott. In the town itself we visited 2 lovely gardens, took a walk along the River Tweed and also looked round the ruins of Melrose Abbey, which is a very interesting burial in its grounds, which you'll see later. Also in the town is the amazing Trimontium Museum. A Roman fort was discovered just outside Melrose, and this museum is dedicated to explaining more about the fort and the lives of the people there. The museum is run by the Trimontium Trust. Trimontium Trust was founded over 30 years ago by a committed band of Roman history enthusiasts. Trimontium was a Roman fort complex. It was occupied from about 79 AD to 104 AD. Trimontium was about 3 times as big as any fort on Hadrian's Wall, and in the later period became the most northerly settlement of the whole Roman Empire. The most remarkable discoveries at Trimontium came from 117 deep pits and wells. These were filled with debris from the fort, including military and domestic equipment dumped by the army. Trimontium was shown on the map of Britain created by the famous Roman geographer and astronomer Ptolemy, but its exact position was lost for over 1,000 years. Ploughing had occasionally revealed carved stones to the east of Newstead. In 1846, workers constructing a railway cutting found several pits containing Roman artefacts. A Roman altar finally confirmed that Newstead was a Roman fort. In 1905, James Curle, a Melrose solicitor and amateur archaeologist, led excavations. The work took 5 years. Curle published A Roman Frontier and Its People in 1911, detailing the sensational discoveries made at the site. Standing on the banks of the River Tweed, Abbotsford was Sir Walter Scott's creation and, after his death in 1832, somewhere visited by millions. It was built on the proceeds of a phenomenally successful literary career, and Scott became determined to keep it in his family as he worked to pay off huge debts after near bankruptcy in 1825. Sir Walter Scott loved the rolling hills, valleys and waterways of the Scottish borders. Initially, Scott redeveloped the original farmhouse. This was subsequently demolished in 1817 and the central section of the new house was built. The east wing was added in 1822 following his elevation to the title of baronet. The west wing was added in the 1850s by Scott's granddaughter. This doubled the overall size of the house. Scott was an obsessive collector of books, artefacts, weaponry and more, much of which can still be seen in the Abbotsford collections. The design of Abbotsford, his conundrum castle, was inspired by local historic buildings and his knowledge of Scottish history. Scott set carved stones and wooden panelling salvaged from other buildings into Abbotsford to give it an ancient atmosphere. The Smiths of Darnick, local builders responsible for much of the work at Abbotsford, carved the stone fireplace which dominates the room. The design was inspired by the Abbot's seat at nearby Melrose Abbey. The study was designed as Scott's private sanctum and was the last room to be completed at Abbotsford in 1824. His later novels were written in this room, together with his 9-volume biography, The Life of Napoleon Bonaparte. The shelves in his study are filled not only with practical reference works, such as dictionaries and encyclopedias, but also with contemporary instruction manuals on planting and tree cultivation that he used to help him develop the land around his home. This octagonal room just off his study and behind his desk is the oratory or speaker bit. It will be used for consultations with legal clients and other businesses of a private nature. Looking out from the oratory, you can see Scott's chair and desk. The desk was made in 1810 by Gillow of London. In 1935, 2 secret drawers were found in the desk, one of which contained more than 50 letters written by Scott to his wife before and after their marriage in 1797. The library at Abbotsford is entirely the creation of Scott. It begins with his chapbooks he collected as a child and continues through the small volumes of poetry he annotated as a schoolboy. There are books gifted to him by his grandfather, mother and aunt, as well as lecture notes he took as a young law student. Sir Walter Scott is one of the most successful authors of all time and is the second most quoted writer in the Oxford English Dictionary after William Shakespeare. Evening leisure pursuits at Abbotsford were centred on the drawing room. When there were no guests, the ladies of the house would adjourn to this room for conversation, reading and needlework. The beautiful wallpaper was hand-painted in China and was a gift from Scott's cousin Hugh Scott, who worked for the East India Company. The great portrait above the fireplace shows Scott and his dogs Camp and Percy seated in the landscape with the valley of Yarrow behind him. Scott often used this room as his private sitting room or boudoir, describing it as an unrivalled little retreat for convenience and delightful elegance. Scott was a knowledgeable antiquary and took great delight in the artefacts he collected. When showing visitors this room, he always pointed to Montrose's sword, which he considered the finest treasure in his collection, and Rob Roy's gun, sword, dirk and sporran. The dining room was the scene of many family occasions and parties of great joviality during Scott's lifetime. Naturally hospitable and famous around the world, Scott rarely wanted for company. Many of his visitors would stay for days at a time, joining the family for every meal. The garden at Abbotsford is distinct in character. Taken together, the layout forms 3 outdoor rooms designed to offer picturesque settings for the main house. The gardens we see today are still fundamentally Scott's work, though with certain alterations carried out by his descendants to adapt the space for the changing needs of the family.